All right, let's all gather around and talk about a camera that came out almost 4.5 years ago. I know I'm like incredibly late to this party, but the truth is I hate parties. Also, I just want to say this video is not sponsored by Sony, so I am free to say whatever the heck I want.
You said we can say whatever the hell we want?
So there's nothing that I could say that is groundbreakingly new about the FX6 that probably hasn't been said already, but what I can do is offer my experience with using this camera for the first time after having used the Sony FX3 as my main camera for the last 4 years. So I used this camera for the first time on a short doc character profile piece on a horse trick rider named Belle DaCosta in Arizona a couple months ago, which you can watch both the final film and the behind the scenes on the channel right now. So why now? Why this camera? Why didn't I just use the Sony FX3 that I've used for so long? And I've said publicly that I have no interest in trying out other cameras because that camera fits all the needs that I do have. And all that stuff is still true. Like I could have just shot it on the FX3, but there was like two main reasons why I wanted to try the FX6. And those two reasons are the biggest gripes that I have with the FX3. And I did in fact use the FX3 a lot on this shoot for gimbal shots, specialty shots, whenever I wanted to be like incognito, like we snuck into a carnival and I had the FX3 and the shots were gorgeous as always. So my first gripe with the FX3 that I've talked about before is that it doesn't have internal ND, and that's probably a lot of people's gripes with the FX3, and a huge selling point of why you would want to go with the FX6 over the FX3. I've tolerated the screw-on filters in the past, and there's a lot of good ones out there. I know on this specific shoot, I'd be dealing with more inconsistent variables that I'd typically be dealing with on a shoot, mainly because I'd be dealing with horses, and horses are not human actors. They have a mind of their own and aren't going to listen to Danny the director. And also I knew we'd be shooting a lot of Bella's performances at the rodeo, which were live events, and you know, I had zero control over those situations. So I didn't want to waste time, risk losing shots by having to like put on, pull off ND filters a bunch of times. So my second gripe with the FX3, and this one's a little weak, and you might think I'm a little lame and corny for thinking this way, but shooting handheld on the FX3, like, image fine, like image looks good. It just doesn't feel sweet, like in your arms, if that makes sense. Prior to using the FX3, I was shooting a lot on the Canon C200, which had a nice built out rig. And I was also like really focusing on my DP career at that point. I was shooting a lot on RE-Alexa Minis, or Reds, and all these different cameras that were built out and it just felt good handheld. Again, not talking about quality of image, just talking about being a dude holding a camera, you know what I mean? That feeling of holding, you know, a full camera package like this is something that I feel like I've been missing the past 4 years. So because I knew I was gonna shoot so much of this project handheld, I wanted to try out the FX6. I wanted to feel like a camera again in my arms. So before we headed out to the shoot, I made sure I like kitted out the FX6 the way I wanted to kit it out, just using my Sony lenses that I use on most of my solo little passion project things like this. I have on it a little Tilta Mirage matte box, which I don't use like functionally, I just think it looks cool. I did kit it out with the basic Tilta rig for the FX6. It has this really tight gold mount adapter that keeps the package nice and tight. The gold mounts fit on there really nicely, and I've just had these gold mounts for a really long time. There's Diotic anti-bowers. I've had them for like 6 years now. Then I slapped on my small HD Cine 7 that I would be using on my FX3 rig. I'm actually using it right now to monitor my talking head for this, so it's not on here right now. Yeah, really love how this thing just looks with the rigging system that I have going on for it. So I talked about this in the behind the scenes. The first couple of shots of that shoot, I was kind of like fumble in the bag a little bit, missing shots because I was hitting wrong buttons or like not hitting record. I didn't have my autofocus settings dialed in perfectly for the content that I was shooting of someone riding a horse straight at me at 30 miles per hour. So I would say it took like a half day for me to like fully become comfortable shooting with the FX6, having come from shooting on the FX3. But once I started feeling good about where the buttons were, how the menu system worked, it was, you know, it's pretty much the same workflow as the Sony FX3. It was especially a pretty natural transition just because it's S-Log 3, S-Gamut Cine 3, or whatever the codec stuff is. Same base ISOs. The color felt pretty much the same. The dynamic range was feeling the same. So I really had a good understanding of what I could and couldn't get away with in terms of exposure and, you know, everything else in terms of the image quality. So after doing a full shoot and having seen the edit, having dealt with the footage, for the most part, I can honestly say that the footage pretty much exactly the same as the FX3 footage in my personal opinion. I couldn't really tell the difference at all. But my two biggest gripes going into this thinking of like, oh yeah, like maybe the internal ND filters would help me on the shoot. Maybe I would just like enjoy the FX6 in a handheld rig a lot more than an FX3. Those thoughts that I had, absolutely correct. Having the variable built-in ND filters was so nice. And it was surprisingly much better than I thought it was gonna be inside this camera. I didn't realize that you could really dial in the ND filter, and it's not like shooting on like an Alexa Mini or other cameras that I've used with built-in NDs where it's like a full stop and it's like the first stop of ND is like that, and then the rest of the ND you can smoothly transition on and off if you wanted to. Whenever I was shooting Bella's rodeo performances inside the stadium, there was a section where she would run from sunlight into the shadow of the grandstands and out of that shadow again. And the exposure was really tricky because every single time she was performing, it was like 1 p.m. in Arizona with no cloud coverage, so the sun was hot. So I was actually able to rack ND as she was coming from the sun. I had the ND on a little bit more, and as she was entering the shadow of the grandstands, I started to roll it off a bit, and as she was exiting again, I would roll it back on. And it was super easy to use with it just being on the side, had the camera on the tripod, and as I was panning with her, I was just playing with the little switch there. Yeah, again, it was just nice being so run and gun at certain points in the shoot, not having to pop the ND filter on and off, putting it in my pocket, forgetting where I put it, struggling with screwing it back on. And again, the second gripe, yeah, this thing just felt awesome, just in my hands. I loved having this side handle. I could kind of just like tuck into my armpit, hit the record button, hold it like this. Just felt comfortable all day long, every day shooting with this thing handheld. Again, corny to say, but I felt like I just looked cool. And then there's like this old saying when you play sports, it's like, look good, feel good, play good. Like you want to dress up in all the cool swag and you feel good about it, and you play better when you feel good because you're more confident. And I kind of felt that way shooting on this. So in using this camera on a full production, apart from those two gripes I had with the FX3 that pushed me to this camera, there was a handful of very unexpected little things that I really enjoyed in my experience in using this camera. The first one being, I don't know if you can see it, this little S and Q button on the side. So S and Q stands for slow and quick for people who aren't aware of that. And typically to get the FX3 into a position of shooting slow motion, higher frame rate, changing shutter speed, my FX3 doesn't have shutter angle yet. It would take a handful of clicks to get you to that point where you're missing shots, you're potentially fumbling settings. But with this camera, it's literally, you click the S and Q button, boom, you're ready to go for shooting slow motion. Boom, you click it again, you're back in normal 24 frames per second. Being able to quickly switch between 24 frames per second and 120 frames per second, like I was able to get such a mixture and variety of footage I was able to play with when I got into the final edit, which is always super important when you're doing these kind of like short doc character profile situations. Like you want to make sure you have enough stuff. Yes, you go into this stuff with a plan, but it's all very unpredictable at the end of the day. So making sure you have stuff to play with in the edit is always nice. So having that option to just switch back and forth whenever I was feeling like the moment was right to capture a slow motion clip or not was really nice. The other thing that was unexpectedly nice, sticking with the slow motion, was there was no loss in quality on the 120 frames per second. Like I didn't have to switch codecs. On the FX3, you have to switch to a lower codec. You can't shoot in the SI in 120 frames per second. I know when you're shooting 4096 by 2160 on this camera, where it's a little bit wider, you can't shoot 120 frames per second on certain cards. You need specific cards. And I was just using my same pro grades that I would use in the FX3. But I knew the final aspect ratio of the film was gonna be 16:9. So I just shot everything 3840 by 2160 the whole time. So that made it so I could record 120 frames per second at a higher codec on the same card. So the last little surprising element of this camera that I really enjoyed was the ability to better monitor your audio. On the Sony FX3, when you're monitoring audio, like, it's so tiny. It's like a little audio meter made for ants. But there's a trick on the FX6. Shout out to my guy, Danny Soto, for helping me with this tip. He's a longtime Sony FX6 user. So he showed me this little hack where you could go into the menu system and go to menu 3 of 10, and then you can make your audio monitoring levels super big on your flip out LCD screen. But that was nice. I had my full image up on my small HD, my audio monitoring levels down here on this screen. Just in general, I felt like it was much nicer having all the audio controls just right here on the inside versus that little, I hate the handle on the FX3. That might be my third gripe with the FX3. The top handle is just, with the audio thing, ugh. So yeah, just some quick closing thoughts. If you're a Sony FX3 user, there's no need to go running out the door to buy an FX6. Again, like, in terms of image, no difference, honestly. There's nothing that you can't do with the Sony FX3. I will stand by that. I'll probably hang on to this camera for a lot of shoots like this, a lot of dock work, a lot of handheld stuff. Probably whenever I'm shooting my smaller, like, individual films like I do with Life at 30 or Little Joys, or my little family film, Labrador, where we took Sansa to the Labrador Sea. That stuff I'll still use solely with the FX3 for, just because it's so small, and I don't want to, you know, I don't want the whole production here. Yeah, thanks for listening to me talk about a camera that's almost 5 years old now, but it shoots like it's brand new. This thing's awesome. It's a beast. But again, like always, like, the camera is just a tool. Don't feel like you need to buy anything or overextend yourself ever. Just use what you got. See you on the next one. I love you. Bye.